Hi, I'm Janice Switlo, and this is part 22 of my book Cede 2.0 regarding the First Nation Land Management Act regime. With the tsunami of domestic entities, lobbying and litigation encouraging Canadian governments to not only carry on as usual, but to also speed up the effort and better fund initiatives like the FNLMA regime and the pending FNPO, there can be insufficient visibility of the actions of Indigenous nations, something I have been warning about for more than 2 decades. There are, of course, the treaties that bear witness, but those fall when there are only new mere creatures of law, federally incorporated First Nations, domestic ethnic minorities, and Aboriginal groups. Fortunately, the core of Indigenous nations carries on strong. This is not speculation or wishful thinking. I have borne witness. Look closely at that big tsunami wave and you will see the skilled Indigenous nationals having the time of their lives soul-arching a gas chamber and getting barreled. There is a language, and you need to live it and hear it from those who know it before even trying to use it. The tourists never hear about the best surf beaches because they would just get in the way and mess it up for those who have, through experience, learned to handle those gnarly waves. Dude, there's just no place for a kook. I was pretty young in the ways of the Indian industry when I left the Department of Justice. I was acting on the naive presumption that, like me, all Indigenous leaders, how can I put this, believed in what the ancestors carried and passed on, believed in their people, believed in the fundamental Indigenous laws of caring, sharing, loving, believed in improving their nations in Canada by acting to remove racism and discrimination and correcting the path of nation-to-nation diplomatic relations. So why push the opt-in regimes? Is it because they perceive the administration as too slow? That's rather like me paying a secretary, then when I find her incompetent to do her job, my then doing her job for me and not only paying her a salary, but also handing over my assets and whole business to her so that I can, put her salary in the bank account for her? That is not regaining jurisdiction, to quote the FNLMRC. That's the Resource Council. Indigenous jurisdiction can never be regained. Once it is lost, it is lost. As soon as any bundle is left by the side of the road, the Crown picks it up and lawfully carries it. No matter how long you then try to run after the Crown, begging the Crown, nothing compels the Crown to even pause and let you take a peek at that bundle that is now hers and hers alone. Everything is then at her pleasure. In the same manner, Indigenous people said to be, quote, seeking sovereignty, end of quote, or asserting sovereignty, since those are admissions of not having it, are actually attempting to interfere with the territorial integrity of Canada, a Bill C-51 trigger, as well as UNIDRIP. Whereas enforcing treaty, engaging in diplomacy is the lawful exercise of Indigenous sovereignty, and enforcing treaty can also concern itself with the Crown's performance in administrative matters. Since there is no provision in the treaties for the Indigenous party to opt out of Crown administration of the reserves, where Crown behavior actually warrants there is a serious problem requiring a diplomatic solution. There can be a stop to the interference and undermining of Indigenous jurisdiction. There can be agreement as to what constitutes lawful administration of reserves. But that is not what the FNLMA regime is. Underlying title. It aligns with conceding underlying title to the Crown. Of course, one community cannot achieve that for the whole of the Indigenous nation, but once you get all of the communities reborn as mere creatures of the law, well, they are literally no Indians left. Revenue sharing. It aligns with removing any basis for revenue sharing. Many of the bands looking at the FNLMA regime may also be trying to pursue revenue sharing. Indigenous economic sovereignty. It also aligns with giving up of Indigenous economic sovereignty. If you look at the incorporation aspects for federal corporations generally, federal law specifically allows for the artificial person to engage in international business subject to laws in foreign jurisdictions. Quote, capacity of a corporation. 15 sub 1. This is from the Canada Business Corporations Act, 1985. A corporation has the capacity and, subject to this act, the rights, powers, and privileges of a natural person. A corporation may carry on business throughout Canada. Extraterritorial capacity, sub 3. A corporation has the capacity to carry on its business, conduct its affairs, and exercise its power in any jurisdiction outside Canada to the extent that the laws of such jurisdiction permit. That is not included regarding incorporated pursuant to the FNLMA. Rather, that artificial person, the First Nation, has the limited function of a domestic person only. Remember, the artificial person can do only what the law creating it allows it to. Looking specifically at the incorporated powers under the FNLMA, the powers of a person are strictly domestically limited. Quote, First Nation powers. Power to manage. 18 sub 1. A First Nation has, after the coming into force of its land code and subject to the Framework Agreement and this Act, the power to manage First Nation land, and in particular may A. Exercise the powers, rights, and privileges of an owner in relation to that land. B. Grant interests or rights in and licenses in relation to that land. C. Manage the natural resources of that land. And D. Receive and use all monies acquired by or on behalf of the First Nation under its land code. Legal capacity, sub 2. For any purpose related to First Nation land. That's a defined term. It's the surrendered reserves. A First Nation has the legal capacity necessary to exercise its power and perform its duties and functions. In particular, may acquire and hold property, B. Enter into contracts, C. Borrow money, D. Expend and invest money, and E. Be a party to legal proceedings. Exercise of power, sub 3, 18 sub 3. The power of a First Nation to manage First Nation land shall be exercised by the Council of a First Nation or by any person or body to whom a power is delegated by the Council in accordance with the First Nation's Land Code, and that power shall be exercised for the use and benefit of the First Nation. Management body, sub 4, a body established to manage First Nation land is a legal entity having the capacity, rights, powers, and privileges of a natural person. End of quote. It bears repeating, the Indian Act has been imposed. The FNLMA, being opt-in, is set up as proposed by, asked for, and agreed to, as you wish.